Hello and welcome to Get It Started, Get It Done, the Banyan Security podcast covering the security industry and beyond. In this episode, our host and Banyan's Chief Security Officer, Den Jones, speaks with Andrej Safundzic, CEO and co-founder of Lumos. Andrej led Angela Merkel's technology task force in the German government, and now he's bringing that background to private sector security solutions. We hope you enjoyed Den's discussion with Andrej Safundzic, covering everything from just-in-time access to what we can learn from aging footballers.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Get It Started, Get It Done. I'm your host, Dan Jones. This is Banyan's adventure into podcasting. So if we suck at making software, maybe this is the plan B, I guess. And every episode I've got some amazing guests, but today I'm blessed to have the co-founder and CEO of Banyan Security, Andrej, and I'm not going to try and even screw up your last name. So, and Andrej, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll get into some fun conversation.
Hello, Dan. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Andrej. I'm, as you said, the CEO and the co-founder of Lumos. My background is, I'm the oldest of five. Grew up in Germany. That's where my shitty accent is from. And how I found my way into security is I led Chancellor Merkel's technology task force in the German government. And government is paranoid, so we built a lot of security and IT tool for our chancellor at that time. And then I came back to the Silicon Valley, right? And now what we're building is an identity governance and a privileged access management tool, right, to govern identities on the web again. So instead of doing this for the public sector, now building security solutions for the private one. So I'm excited to talk about all of that today.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for your time as well. I know you're a busy guy. So just for the Americans in the audience, a chancellor of Germany is the equivalent of the president of the US, right?
Exactly. So it's called the Federal Chancellery in Germany. That's basically the White House, of Germany. And yeah, so there's no president. There is a president, but less important. The most important person in the government is the chancellor, which was Angela Merkel 2 years ago, and now it's a person called Olaf Scholz.
Awesome. And yeah, Angela, she was in charge for quite a while, right? Did she do several terms and stuff?
Yeah, she did 16 years. So it's not like in the States where you can only kind of be elected twice. Think about this. Some people, especially the generation that was born post 2000, grew up with one president, so to say.
Yeah.
And that's just like terrific. And that's just like interesting to reflect on.
That's awesome. Yeah. And the Scottish guy, right? So I pay attention to some of the stuff that goes on in Europe, but she had quite an impressive tenure. I mean, she'd done a lot of great stuff. So I was pretty impressed. And, I think, because I've done a lot of work in Germany over the years. And I just remember like the country's growth and stuff, under her tenure is pretty stellar.
No, and I mean, like the U.S. government actually just recently released a cybersecurity strategy, right? And what was interesting about Angela, she in 2000 for the last 10 years, she said, "Freaking hell, the government is too old school when it comes to technology, right?" And instead of outsourcing everything to certain consultancies to build everything externally, she said, let's bring in the smartest people that usually work for the Facebooks, the Googles, etc., so that they work within the government and create impact, right? And so that's the initiative. It was called Digital Service for Germany. That I, my two co-founders Sonia and Christina, were spearheading. And it was a lot of fun. We built a lot of interesting stuff for the government.
Awesome. Now let's get into this. So why don't you explain just a little bit about Lumos, the co-founders, and what made you guys decide to start your own company?
Yes. So here's the problem, right? There's something what we call the app apocalypse or the cloud apocalypse, right? Where over the last 15 years, there are more and more apps, and there's more and more access, both in corporate apps and in cloud applications, right? So the problem with that is if, for example, Twitter, pre-Elon Musk, which is quite interesting, 51% of all Twitter employees had production access. Isn't that crazy?
Wow. Yeah.
So it's increasing, like the access is increasing. So the problem is like, okay, how can we decrease access but not decrease productivity? Usually what a security person does is, they put in some measures, but that decreases the productivity of the company. And so they're usually the police officer. But how can we be, an enabler and a protector at the same time, right? That's kind of the question. And in the past, people used for this type of problem solutions like a sale point, right? What that usually is, what SailPoint helps you with is, you can request access to, let's say, they were usually on-prem to some on-prem database. You go there, say like, I need this database, approvals are handled, you get access to it. And then, you have those quarterly access reviews, that are happening. And they were also done in those solutions. So the problem with that one is like very old school. It's not cloud native, and it was kind of a very clunky, UI, and people hated it.
Mm-hmm.
Now what Lumos is doing is we're building a solution that automates access requests into corporate apps in the cloud, user access reviews, and privileged access management to those applications. So what you can do is two things. You go into Slack or into a web app, you say, I need this AWS permission, or I need this cloud secret. We handle the approvals automatically in Slack on the web app. We log everything in an IT ticket, and then we automatically provision. After 7 days, we remove your access because it's just like you need it just like for a shorter period of time. So that's kind of one of the solutions that we offer. The main benefit of this, self-service. So the time to resolution for our tickets is 4 minutes on average. But admin permissions also go down. See what I'm trying to say? Because people have access to things for like 2-3 minutes, 2-3 hours.
It's really funny because in my Adobe days, I had a team and we basically built a self-service portal that sat on top of. So I kind of, the resonating is, SailPoint's user experience was not delightful and the self-service nature of it was not delightful. And I'm a big fan, SailPoint and CyberArk and all of these guys. But the problem was that whole self-service mindset wasn't really built into the product or, the service that they were delivering. So we ended up building some shit in front. And in the end, we've done the same as you guys. We were like, we can take a ticket that would normally an access request, it could take days or weeks, and it's seconds and minutes, right? So, and we, believe it or not, we built the first version of this thing called eManager. We built it in about 2003.
Oh, really?
Me and this guy called Venkatesh. And Venkatesh was a Lotus Notes developer. And I the first run of this was, because it was all AD in those days, first run was batch files and Lotus Notes.
Yeah.
And it was shit. But it was on the premise of, I'm going to add or remove you to and from a group. I mean, it was really simple. I mean, it wasn't
removing to AD groups. That what you built like in the self-service portal to request access to AD groups, right?
Yeah, back then. And we would map folder structures in the file servers to AD groups. And then as you move forward and you're using the Oktas of the world, you're publishing an app, but you're mapping that app to an AD group, right? Or to a cloud group now. So it's pretty cool. Now, but I want to jump back because I'm gonna ask you in a minute to do your 3-minute kind of elevator pitch on why a CSO should buy your stuff, right? But before I get there, the one thing I missed was, what made you guys decide to start a company?
Yes, very good question. Many different points. So the first one point is I love security, right? That's what I've done in the government, and protecting people. That's what the government is there for, right? Protecting people from harm. So now I miss the States. I did my undergrad here, went back to Germany to do kind of work there, but I miss the States. I miss the ambition. I miss the entrepreneurship that people display here. Right. So I came back and I said, okay, how can I contribute to, moving the conversation in the security world forward? So because I'm international, I had to go back to school. So I did my, grad studies at Stanford in computer science. right? And I found a few other, my two co-founders, there, Leo and Alan, right? And we were at that time, COVID just hit, right?
Mhm.
And we actually looked at this from a consumer lens first. Saying, do you know, Dan, do you know for how many apps as a consumer you signed up for? Do you know?
I have no idea, actually. I mean, if I look at my password manager, I can look to see how many apps I have or passwords I have stored there. And I guess that's probably the closest I'm going to get, right?
The closest you're gonna get, exactly. And so our question is like, okay, how could we protect? There's no time-based access for consumers, right? You give your access once to a company, they keep
Yeah.
you give your authorization in Google. Usually, you sign in with Google, you authorize them to have access to your Google profile, usually forever, and you give them all those other, permissions. And we're like, damn, how could we have some kind of time-based access, for consumers,
Mhm.
for all the data that they have, out there. But what we've seen is, when it came to APIs and stuff like that, it was like in the consumer world, it was very hard to kind of set up, a solution when it came to that, and also companies usually have more, sensitive data, I would say. So we just pivoted our consumer approach from protecting, access to sensitive access for consumers to protecting sensitive access for employees. And why COVID? Because during COVID, suddenly we used all those collaboration tools and we spun up all those AWS, new AWS accounts, and we're just like, hacking around, and so that's when it especially became tough to manage that problem.
Yeah. Oh no, that's awesome. So elevator pitch, right? I'm going to wear my CSO hat because I am a CSO, I guess. But in the Adobe days, my Cisco days, I'd have lots of companies like you guys come in and try and pitch and sell us your wares, right? So why don't you jump in and just give us a 2 or 3 minutes? Why Lumos? Why you're disruptive? Why trust you guys over somebody else?
Great question. So number one is, what is the problem, right? There are actually two problems in the security side. One is the more compliance side of things. Do you need to do user access reviews? Yes. If you're SOC 2 company, is it a pain in the ass? Usually, yes, with spreadsheets. So, how can we just like simplify? The first problem is like, how can I simplify the pain of user access reviews? That's the first point. It's more the compliance piece. The second point is, we've seen this with the Circle CI hack, right? There was a hack for Circle CI. What happened? The developer had a ton of access. Hacks will happen. We cannot prevent that. But the developer had a ton of production data access, right? So when this developer's account got compromised, the hacker was able to kind of pull customer secrets. So now, why do developers and employees have so much sensitive access? Can we reduce it while keeping productivity high? Right. So basically what Lumos is doing is two things, right? A, it reduces the number of admin privileges by giving out access only when they are on call or only for an hour or a day, but not harming their productivity, because they can go just into Slack on a web app and say /request AWS, this cloud application. We handle the approvals and provision it automatically. So you get both things, more productivity and less outstanding and long-standing cloud or customer data access. And then as a benefit of that, packed together with this kind of powerful self-service solution, you get a whole user access review solution, right? Just like complete your annoying user access reviews that you need to do anyways for auditors, and just square that away so that your security team can focus on more important things. So that's the short pitch, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Totally. Yeah. And it sounds like, there's a blend of JIT going on there, right? So just-in-time access. And then from a disruptor perspective, why do you think you're going to be more disruptive than the SailPoints, the CyberArks, a lot of the traditional companies? What's the pitch there?
Yes, great question. So there are 4 answers to this one. The first answer is, it took 134 days to build the Empire State Building. 134 days to build the entire Empire State Building. Why the heck does it take, a year or two to deploy a cyber Arco SCL point? That's kind of number one. Is you have a whole you have like 4 or 5, security engineers if you're a bigger company working on such a tool.
Yeah,
a year or two, like they could have, prevented other issues from happening. Lumos is usually rolled out within 3 months. It's crazy.
right. Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Like a company like Postman, one of our customers, deployed Lumos in 30 days, which is a smaller company, 1,000 employees, and the companies that are bigger, 10,000 plus, deployed usually in 90 days. So number one. Number two is the user experience, right? People will only go through, if the compliant path is the easy path, people will actually go through it. You need to be secure by design, right? So that's kind of because we're in Slack, right? Or in a nice web app. It's very simple to request access for an end user. 2. 3, we have something called event-bound access. So basically what event-bound access means, or time-based access. So people don't just request access and you then need to do a user access review every 3 months. That's not secure by design, because everyone knows user access reviews, you don't really do them well, right? You just do them, it's click fatigue.
Yep.
We do is we just give you access either for 7 days or while you're on call. That's kind of the event side, right? In that way, what we've seen, for example, Segment has actually a public blog post about this. They had 700 AWS admin permissions before they implemented GISGID. 700 AWS admin permissions. Because birthright access, I'm part of this role, I get this, app, etc. Now, when they implemented just-in-time access, they reduced it down to 70, I think. It was 80%. Because just at a given time, you just got it for a particular amount of time. That's kind of the third. Point. I think those are kind of the 3 main things, to be honest. Time to roll out, user experience, and security by design through this new model of break glass and just-in-time access.
And when you're doing the request workflow, do you have the concept of pre-approved, or so basically if I'm already in the role, I'm an engineer, and you're kind of pre-approved for the access, then that obviously can be streamlined versus requires manager approval, right? So it's almost like requires it every time by a human to click a button, or, well, it's that role anyway, so the default answer is yes. So I can go through a pre-approved workflow. Do you have that concept?
Exactly, and actually we have even more. Here's why. So usually, let's talk about identity and access management design, right? And how to design it so that it's secure by design. Usually what just people talk about is birthright RBAC access, right? That's the first category. I'm part of this role. I'm, let's say, SecOps, right? I get this AWS permission. The problem with that is hard to maintain, and people usually get too much access. Then on the other side, and we haven't talked, that's not the pre-approval piece, is the self-service piece, right? I want to have this permission. I do it in Slack or whatever, I need this, AWS permission. My manager approves, I get access to it for 7 days. Now, the good thing about that one is we decrease over provisioning by giving you access and letting you go through approvals. The bad thing is it might slow you down. What about if you wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning and need to fix a bug, right? That's where this pre-approvals comes in, which is like kind of this, bridge between birthright access and just-in-time. What that means is, for example, if I request access to an AWS permission and I'm on call, right? It's an attribute. I'm on call. You get access to it just while you're on call. No approval needed because pager duty, it has configured that. Or if I request access to this permission and I only ask for it for an hour, right? Not for a whole 7 days, just for an hour, I'm pre-approving you just for that hour, right? So there are like kind of a few of those.
So you can be granular in the configuration of the approval, the access, the time, things of that nature, yeah.
And all of those 3 are important. When people talk about, least privilege when it comes to the zero trust, initiative, to really drive this home, you need it's kind of complicated, right? Usually it's a complicated approach, and that's why you have smart security architects, right, that try to do that. And so it's important to have all those 3 things, within one solution.
Yeah, and and you know, I hate to be a little controversial, but I will be for a minute. I think least privileged is bullshit. I think in the industry, it's bullshit. It's always been bullshit, and the reason for that is a couple of things. One is, yeah, I give you birthright access. Second, and usually you're getting birthright access because you're in a role, but you didn't need the access, and that's the thing you guys have picked up on, right? But the other thing is, we're very good at giving access and we're ridiculously shit at taking it away. We add you to groups and add you to groups, and eventually you're in lots of groups that you don't need to be in. And even if you change your role, now, you know, my team at Adobe done a stellar job on their deployment of SailPoint. And one of the more mature ones, they'd been doing it for so long that we had this thing nailed to the point where change role, that your title change or manager change could then trigger an event and da 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 da. But you know, we evolved over years and years and years, and we had a really small team, but we had a consistent team. It was the same people for many years, and they were bright as shit, right? So we were, I'm going to say, a unicorn compared to a lot of the other companies out there. Because when I speak to people today, when I'm doing the conferences and the rounds and stuff, it is an industry, the whole identity and access management industry, and I'll include the privilege stuff in here too. The industry, I think, has been living a bit of a lie for many years. And the first thing is it's too expensive to really do things like attestation every quarter. Like a company might have 50,000 groups. You got 50,000 groups. Are you telling me you're looking at those groups and going, yep, John needs to be in that group? It's bullshit. So I think the reality is a lot of companies are doing audits and audits and audits, but you know, really deep down, when you peel that back, it's a very expensive proposition.
Exactly. And if you architect your system well, so that goes back into being secure by design, right? If you architect your system well, right? You know, let's say you have 500 roles in your AWS system, right? How can we make sure that, you know, imagine there's no birthright access at all. Imagine this. No birthright access at all, and everything is just in time access. We've seen our data shows that your access is reduced by 80+%. Right. So instead of doing, you know, attestations for 10,000, you know, roles, you do them for 1,000, and it becomes kind of more manageable, I would say.
And actually, financially, I would suggest that you don't need to do attestations any longer if you're doing JIT. Because when you do JIT, what you're really saying is, yeah, John needs the access for that duration, and then it's removed. That means you're actually attesting in real time that John needs the access. So one of the things that we were doing, because, and I can imagine with your environment, it's great when everything's flowing through you, but I could in the background still go to some system and do some manual adding and playing around and fudging the system, right? So it would be great for you guys to look at log data. And what I built in Adobe was a team called Security Intelligence. And what they were doing was they were looking at all the data for authentications and access from the SIM. We were ingesting that. We were doing some anomalous behavior, UABA stuff, looking for anomalous events. And that was cool for catching the bad person logging in as you from, you know, Japan when you're in the US and they're in a Windows box and you're in a Mac. And so those are the basics. At Cisco, we actually partnered with Exabeam and we've done the exact same thing. But the thing I added on top was if you've not logged into an application after 90 days, I'm going to remove you from the group automatically. And I'm going to email you and say, I've removed you from the group. It looks like you're not using it. In the future, if you need access, here's the process to request access. And then we had that self-service mechanism.
By the way, yes. So basically, there are two things in here. One thing that we first address is we call it identity drift. So imagine, you know, one person doesn't go through the Lumos process and they just open the AWS console and add you to this AWS group. How do we detect this identity within the Lumos platform or within a SIM? Both of that works. But then on the other side, how to prevent that from, even if that happens, how can we prevent that? You could build a process around this, like detection remediation, or you could say, like, as you said, by default, we call it activity removals. So you have time-based access, but then you have activity removals, which is a kind of, I would say, supportive, security measure, where even it doesn't matter even how you got access. After 90 days, everyone loses access no matter what, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I love what you're saying there.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because the reality is, it's an industry where there's not very many players. Most of the players have grown up through the on-premise approach, and they are evolving to be cloud-centric. But some of them, not name and shame, but some of them are just building some shit in AWS for their customers, and it's not really a it's a single instance for the customer, but they're no different than if it was on-prem. It's just they happen to build it in AWS for you, or name your favorite cloud, right? So I know some of the players that are doing that. I know some of the players that have taken the code that they had built over the years, and they're cloudifying themselves, really. But the reality is they're just running shit in the cloud. And for me, that's just a different data center. It's not like this. I could run it in my data center, or I could run it in AWS or GCP or OCI or whatever, right?
Yes.
Now, one of the things, I'm kind of going to jump around a little bit here. When I think of integrations, one of the things that slows down a lot of deployments is the number of applications that you're managing as part of your platform. So do you guys do any tips or tricks to help accelerate? Because if you say, hey, we can deploy our stuff in 90 days, that really comes down to not just how cool your team is, but ultimately, how many applications am I going to integrate the access workflow into, right? So what is it you guys do that you think is making you faster to implement compared to the others out there?
No, that's a good question. So there are actually two problems there. Number one is the integrations, but then number two is like all the approval policies, setting up the approval policies, and usually you need to code this. You need to write code usually, to set all of that stuff up. So that's usually the two things that slow things down, right? And then the third thing is if it's kind of a whole new process, so change management, right? Mm-hmm. So let me go through each of those. First, let's do the change management. We are just we always say we're an augmentation. We call this on-night channel. So we're just like, in Slack, people already use Slack, call it just your app store, right? And just this is like yet another, at least for starters. Like, we call it like kind of a minimum viable rollout. You start small. Hey, here's another channel for you to request access to Lumos. What we have as well is we have AI in your ticketing system. So when you create a ticket in your ticketing system, not through the Slack app or the web app, our AI says, can we kick off this workflow, through this, app store tool? That's That's kind of just like, user experience and how to roll this out easily. To the approval policies, the interesting thing about that one is like, it's a very click, dropping. It's just like a no
point and click to set it all up.
Exactly. Thank you for helping international here. But it's point and click. And we have like kind of this nested approach. So you define policies on an app level, and then you can deviate them on a permission level, but you don't need to deviate it for every kind of permission. Let's say by default, this app should be manager approval, but only those 3 sensitive permissions should have additional approvers assigned to it. So it's kind of less to configure.
Yeah.
The last thing on the integration side, that's quite interesting. So you have just like direct integrations to, hopefully a lot of, cloud. If it's cloud, it's always simple and more easy, right? You can have direct integrations. That's A. B, a lot of, of those amazing, IAM tools now have SCIM, right?
Yeah.
OneLogin, AD, all of them have SCIM. And you can, if I add you to this AD group, you automatically get access to this AWS group, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So we just basically automatically ingest all those groups.
So you're not really as worried about the application API itself as opposed to really the group, because kind of what I mentioned earlier, right? Is if you use your directory-based groups, and then the groups are the things that have the access to the stuff in the background, then the reality is you don't need to connect to Salesforce. You can just connect and leverage the groups that Salesforce is going to use, and it's really enforcing that architectural decision and implementation that something like Salesforce will leverage the groups and they'll replicate back and forth.
At least for starters, right? For starters, we ingest all AD groups or Okta groups and let's go, right? Yeah. Let's go. And then you can iterate from there, right? The learning of software engineering, as we know now, is like don't ever do a waterfall approach, right? Build a skateboard. Don't build a car. Build a skateboard, then a bicycle, then a car, right? And that's the approach that we recommend.
And one thing, so when we talk about things you integrate with, you mentioned Slack, but if someone's a Teams shop, do you guys do Teams as well, or is that somewhere in the roadmap?
Yes, so Teams is, we have a couple of customers that use Teams, and that should be out hopefully pretty soon. Yeah. But right now, hopefully when people, listen to this, in 6 months from now, it'll be out there. But it's you need Teams and Slack, both of those things, and we just need to ship.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, Microsoft's a big ecosystem, right? So things like Teams, and then Azure AD and Azure AD groups and things of that nature, like the Oktas and everything else. So a couple of little divergences here. Okay, so obviously running a startup is a busy game. So when you're not working, what do you do for fun?
Oh, good question. So what I love doing is, because I work for the government, I believe that the power of words is so impactful, right? Like telling a story, similar to as a company, honestly, or as an executive, and like especially CISOs nowadays, like how do they kind of tell a story, to executives of why things that they're doing is important. In a similar way, what I just love doing is just reading fantasy books. Fantasy books is always a hero's journey, where this anti-hero, this weird guy or girl, Frodo, goes down an unbeaten path and goes, through a transformation to, hopefully save the day. And so I just read, fantasy books left and right and run marathons. So that's my second thing.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I've not ran very often, and I hate reading books. It's funny. I was talking to my CEO.
Opposite.
Yeah, I was talking to my CEO yesterday, and I'm like, man, I hate reading books. I'm doing a book review for one of my friends, and I just hate reading books. I'm like, oh, geez. So I'm going to be in a long flight tomorrow.
Right? Then I can see you are like a young guy. You're a TikTok person, right?
I get bored. I'm like, yeah. I mean, shit. I remember the first book I ever read, start to finish. I was probably in my 30s, and it was How to Be a Millionaire. And it literally was about, how do you start a business, do franchising, And that for me was fascinating because there was that whole entrepreneurial side of it. But it's funny, for my job, I read when I have to, but I get bored. My attention span is just not good enough. It never has been. So yeah.
So what do you do? What's your thing?
Well, as you can tell with all the shit behind me, I'm a huge musician, electronic house, tech, trance, get that kind of stuff. And actually, the other thing I'll put out there is I'm quite shit at it because I'm not talented at music when I'm doing this job, and I'm not doing the famous musician going around the world. So I think
at least you're a maker and I'm an observer. So you are the champ and I'm just like observing you, doing great things.
Yeah, and on the making thing as well. So I'm a creative. I'm a left-handed person, and I'm totally creative. So I love to cook. So like fine dining, little intricate bites and things of that nature. So I like to do that. But it also means I like to eat.
For all the listeners, when you kind of listen this, just like send an email to Dan to Dan's email, and he's going to give you a free dinner. He loves cooking for random people, so just like send him an email.
Well, send me the email. At least if you're going to be an RSA, we might add you to the RSA games night or dinner that we're going to have. That's probably a good second.
Yes.
And maybe you'll get better quality food. So yeah, now also coming from Germany, right? I'm going to assume that you either played football, and for the Americans that'll be soccer, but played football or you follow football, probably big into the World Cup and all that business. So any gossip there for you?
Yeah, so actually, when I was growing up, I played, I would say even like professionally, I played in an academy. There's a team, a football or soccer team called Red Bull Salzburg. No, Red Bull New York, but
Yeah.
in the same kind of daughter team is in Salzburg. So I'm from Croatia, but I grew up in Germany, so it's called Red Bull Salzburg. So I played there until I was 16. Sadly didn't make it, and now my friends are playing in the World Cup. But anyways, but the cool thing about me is because I have a dual citizenship, Germany and Croatia.
Yeah.
Germany, won 2014. Croatia became second 2018 and third 2022. So I always can, hedge my bets in some way.
I know, whereas I'm coming from Scotland, which means we're kind of screwed.
Yes, screwed.
Yeah, I was going to say, so we are recording this, and just an hour before, Real Madrid were playing Liverpool in the Champions League game. And one of the best midfielders, Luka Modric,
Yes.
It's amazing. I don't know how old he is now. He's
38.
Yeah, 38. All right, 38, yeah. And in football years, that's like 110. Yeah. But the guy is still like absolute kick-ass and stuff. And it's crazy to think that the guy's getting to an age where, some of the new people, like junior kids that are getting into first teams at like 17, it's almost like, they're not much older than his kids probably.
Yeah. No, they are not
crazy.
And this is the beauty of, I would say, excellence. Right, we see this also with Messi. He's 35. We see this with LeBron James, who's just like bringing in those, like Luka Doncic is 21, 22, and then there's LeBron, and LeBron still plays at this high level. Tom Brady, played at it. This year wasn't as good, but before. So it's quite interesting how excellence for a human being can persevere over many, many years.
Yeah. There's a consistency in your professionalism, right? I mean, the reality is in the sports arena, to be that good for that long, not just takes dedication, but it's consistency. And, I'll do that fake twist into our professional life and basically say, in order to be really successful in our business, you're building a brand, you're building a reputation, and that brand and reputation doesn't happen overnight. And it really is, especially in leadership. I mean, I look at leadership like it's hard to build trust and it's really easy to break trust. And the people who will join you from company to company to company and hedge their bets in you as a leader, they're not the ones you screwed over 10 years ago. They're not the ones that you fumbled and made your shitty leadership mistakes with. They're the ones that are like, yeah, I trust what they're doing. And I take pride in the fact that I've improved over the years as a leader, and I've got people that have reported into my organization like three times. So for somebody who want to work for me 3 times, I'm either like they're either crazier than 2 shits, or I've done something right along the way. And I actually think it's a blend of both, to be honest.
Your squad over the many, many years that succeeds, again and again. And in the end, here's the thing. At the end, sometimes we take ourselves too seriously, right? So the most important thing, similar to, let's go back to books, right? We talked just about books, about 2 things: going down an unbeaten path, but at the same time, the books is all about character development, where Frodo grows through Gandalf and all the other friends, right? And so the most important thing is, smile from now and then and have people around you at work that you feel like that you can trust and you can have fun with. And I think that's something we forget. And that's why, people like you have the people around themselves that they really enjoy seeing on a daily basis.
Yeah. And the other thing as well is I kind of know where my deficiencies are now. So when I'm building a team, I always want to try and build my team with people that, help make up the gap and where I fall short. So again,
people, right? Only right-handed people in this case.
Right-handed people and personally, people that can read a book. Someone one that will read a book start to finish, and probably they can't cook, so I can help out there. So, yeah. So Andrej, look, it's been awesome getting some of your time. I know how busy a guy you are. If you want to leave the audience with, I'm going to say two things, right? One is a great takeaway from today's conversation. And then secondly, how can they find out more about Lumos and why Lumos?
Great. So, I mean, one takeaway for sure is secure by design, I would say. That's maybe for the latter thing. How can you be secure by design and maybe not do those user access reviews in the first place? Build self-service and time-based access management, and so you have more productivity and more security at the same time, right? And Lumos, just lumos.com, or ping me at Andrej, Andrej, the J is silent, at lumos.com. And personally, honestly, I think this was actually a good wrap-up. Surround yourself with people that complement you and that you can have a blast with. Right-handed, left-handed people both. So I think that's my learning. That's my learning for today.
Awesome. Well, Andrej, thank you first of all for your time. I'll wrap up by saying, one thing for me in my time at Adobe, I learned business partners are vitally important, and building relationships are critical to your success. So, as someone who delivered services to large enterprises, it's really important that you're going to have people in your team that really enable you to deliver, right? So for me, finding people like Banyan was a really important piece of that story, especially in my Adobe journey. And then, for me, looking at people like Lumos would be part of that as well. So it's really important to find complementary to your full-time employees, the extended team, and the partnership like a company like Lumos. And also, I guess, Banyan as well, because our shit is brilliant. So I mean, buy some of that stuff.
Plus one. We have I can plus one that RSA is coming up.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. So so before we wrap, RSA is around the corner. So you guys are going to be hanging around San Francisco for sure. We're going to be around San Francisco. So definitely, if you want to see the products or meet the teams, that'd be a great thing. And then, Andrej, are you guys going to be at Black Hat or DevCon or any other big events this year?
We're just planning all of that. Honestly, we know that we're going to be at RSA, and the rest we are literally planning right now. AWS reInvent, Black Hat, all those other things. It's I need to ask my marketing team, but you need to be everywhere, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, you need to try and be everywhere for all people, right? So, folks, thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Andrej, again, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And we'll catch you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about Banyan Security and find future episodes of the podcast, please visit us at banyansecurity.io. Special thanks to Urban Punks for providing the music for this episode. You can find their track Summer Silk and all their music at urbanpunks.com.